can be for a synagogue. So we're very excited to be able to share some very important information about this new initiative. I'm honored to welcome all of you who are joining us today, and would like to now turn things over to the Executive Vice President and the Chief Professional Officer of the Orthodox Union, to Alan Fagin, to begin this webinar.
Thank you, Rabbi Shaffer, and hello, everyone. I just want to say a few words of brief introductory remarks to get this webinar going. In the face of this horrendous epidemic that all of us are living through and trying to deal with its challenges, the Jewish Federations of North America, the umbrella group for federations across the United States, has facilitated the creation of a program called the Jewish Community Communal Response and Impact Fund, or JCRIF for short, as we refer to it, which is really a remarkable program. It is a consortium of a number of major foundations who have come together to create a pool of over $90 million of funding to be made available for interest-free loans and grants in order to maintain the infrastructure, the vital communal infrastructure that all of us depend on for the essence of Jewish life across the United States. I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank all of the foundations that have been involved in this effort. They include the Aviv Foundation, the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation, the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation, the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Maimonides Fund, the Paul Singer Foundation, the Diane and Guilford Glazer Foundation, and the Wilf Family Fund. And we really are enormously grateful to each of them for this really magnanimous gesture. These are funds that are being made available now over and above the regular charitable giving of each of these organizations. We're proud to be able to partner together with JCRIF to make these loan funds available to Shuls within our network. We want to publicly thank Eric Fingerhut, the CEO of JFNA. Many of us not only know Eric from his work currently at JFNA, but certainly had the pleasure of dealing with him in his years running Hillel. And we're enormously grateful to him. Likewise to Felicia Herman, the director of the Natan Fund, who has responsibility for the grant side of the JCRIF enterprise. And we want to extend a very, very special thank you and a very warm welcome to Shira Hutt. Shira is wearing probably too many hats that she can count here. She is the chief of staff of the JFNA, itself a full-time job. But I can tell you that for the past number of weeks, Shira has been living and breathing this program nonstop, day and night, trying to make certain that these funds get out and are made available to Shuls and other institutions throughout our community so that we can continue to do the vital work that we do. And on behalf of all of us, I just want to say, Shira, thank you not just for being with us today during this webinar, but for all the incredible work that you've been doing over the past weeks and helping us all cope with the extraordinary challenges of this pandemic. So without further ado, I want to turn the program over to Shira. She will describe the nature of the program, various of its rules and regulations and procedures. And then, Shira, if it's okay with you, we'll try to open up the floor to questions from the group. Shira Hutt.
Thank you so much for that very lovely introduction and welcome. And also thank the Orthodox Union in general, the entire team, for making this webinar possible, for all of you for being on today's call, and frankly, for everything that you do, for our community, and in good times, and unfortunately right now in not as good times. And just as you heard, of course, the reason that we're in this conversation about JCRIF today is because of the really incredible generosity of the 8 funders that have come together initially. We hope others will join them in time to make possible the Jewish Community Response and Impact Fund. I have prepared some slides to help walk you through today. So let me just take a moment to share
Shira,
my screen.
while you're sharing your screen, I just want to mention to everyone listening, if you have questions as Shira is presenting, I'm going to be moderating any questions for Shira after she's concluded her presentation. So please use the chat function to submit your questions. And I'm sure we'll have a few minutes after this comprehensive presentation to address any questions. Shira, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. I'm having a little trouble sharing my screen. I think I need to have permission. So I will start, if someone can give me permission in the meantime, I'll start telling you a little bit about the program, and I'm sure the technology will catch up. The good news is
I think I may have just done that, Shira. Just check if.
No, it's not working yet. But the good news is that I've told the story of JCRIF a few hundred times now, so I should be okay. But if we can, I'll add the slides at some point. So as you heard, there's 8 funders that came together to initially form a $91 million pot of money that is being provided to organizations through 2 programs that are part of the Jewish Community Response and Impact Fund, the Align Grant Program and the Interest-Free Loan Program. We're really going to focus on the Interest-Free Loan Program today.
Shira, it should be working now.
It should work now. No problem. Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone for bearing with us. Okay, so as I said, a $91 million fund to really help us weather the storm that we're in. One of the things that's really that came about in the early days of COVID response, and it was in large part, part of the privilege that JFNA had in trying to lead the way in COVID response, as you heard earlier, is the formation of the National Emergency Coalition that has brought together key national networks, including major movements. And of course, the Orthodox Union has been part of that effort. And this coalition has been meeting weekly, really for the past 12 or so weeks, to share the experiences, to partner, to collaborate. This has been a unique moment that requires a unique response. And I'd like to frame this initially because in many ways, both the formation of the fund in and of itself and the way that we're working in close partnership with national networks, including, of course, our partnership with the OU that we're bringing forward to you today through this webinar, are really, hopefully it's the way that we should always work in our community, but it has been especially important in this moment. And one of the unique aspects of even the 8 funders that have come together to form JCRIF is that they're not always the same funders that you see around the same funding table or the same virtual table as you will find people today. They're funders that have really understood that this is a moment that has required them to look beyond their typical investments in Jewish life in order to really help our community get from here to hopefully better days. And similarly, we know that it's important to work in close collaboration with our national networks and movements in order to first and foremost leverage their expertise, your expertise, and to ensure that we can really cast wide a net as possible in making sure that this reaches organizations throughout the United States. JCRIF is a US-based initiative, but of course the intention is to reach all communities, all local, congregations, Hillels, JCCs, and on. And so we're really grateful to the OU for helping us bring this opportunity to all of you. So let's get into into a little bit more of the details around the interest-free loan program in particular. As you heard, this is about preserving critical communal sectors and organizations. The loans themselves are really about providing you some breathing room. We understand that because of the moment that we're in, many organizations are experiencing disruptions in their revenue, whether it's cash flow, whether it's fundraising that's been disrupted, services, fee for services that have been disrupted. It may even be membership dues and whatnot. And so we want to make sure that you have that breathing room to really bridge the moment that we're in. As such, this is a loan that is intended to be repaid, which I smile when I say, because frankly, we're living really in a unique moment where the government has made forgivable loans available to some extent, right? Some portions are not forgivable. In this case, this is a loan that is intended for repayment, as loans typically are. That being said, the terms of this loan are incredibly favorable, both in that they're interest-free for the duration of the 48 months, and the fact that there is a 48-month repayment timeline here. The expectation is that organizations that do receive loans will begin repayment about 12 months after receipt of the loan, and then will make payments in quarterly installments. But again, they have another 3 additional years to complete those payments. The other thing that I'll mention that really speaks to the importance of this partnership with the OU in bringing forward this opportunity is that when the program was launched, the lenders initially provided guidance parameters that loans would be in the $500,000 to $3 million range. They subsequently determined that in order to really reach, as I said, organizations, congregations throughout North America, we recognize that sometimes on the ground locally, there are organizations that may require a loan at this moment, but that $500,000 floor would have been too high for them. So the lenders added additional guidance that for organizations that are applying independently, but through a umbrella, and you'll hear more about that process later in this call, the minimum loans can be at $150,000. Now, the way that you would calculate to make sure that you actually meet that floor is by essentially the equation is 40% of the average 3 years operating budget less the debt service for the next 48 months. So just to break that down a little differently, if you take the average of your last 3 years of operating, so I wouldn't count this year, I would count the last 3 years, subtract from that your debt service anticipated for the next 48 months, that number that you're left with can then be multiplied by 0.4. That will help you determine essentially if you meet that floor. So just to give you a sense, if you don't have debt service, a budget of about $500,000 annually would equal that minimum loan amount. The key, otherwise in terms of eligibility, I'll just mention that the program is really focusing the areas of education, engagement, and leadership. By virtue of being in this partnership with the OU and on this webinar, members of the OU are eligible for this program. And I'll just say that, in terms of eligibility criteria, one of the key elements that the lenders are going to be looking at in the application process, which I'll speak more about in a moment, is really about the applicant's path to repayment. As I said, the loans do need to be repaid under these very, favorable terms. And I'll also say, and this is also why it's so important that this is rooted in the values of our community, there is a hope that for organizations that receive a loan and are able to pay that loan even more quickly than that 48-month runway, that those loan dollars may be able to be recycled and used again for another organization that may need it, because of course, as we all recognize, we're still in a moment of unknown, of uncertainty, and we don't know when all of this will end. So let's talk a little bit, we're almost done and then we can get to your questions. Let's talk a little bit about the application process. In doing this, I did want to both acknowledge, as you heard, JFNA is playing in many ways a principal advising role to the lenders on this program, but really our intention is to work in close partnership with in this case, the OU. And so you'll hear in a few minutes the process by which you can apply as part of the OU slate of applications, which to be clear, would bring you forward as an individual applicant and would be assessed individually as a loan applicant, but part of the slate of applications that would come through from the OU. And the other part of this process that I think makes this a very thorough and thoughtful process is that the lenders have engaged the Nonprofit Finance Fund, NFF for short, in both housing the loan dollars and providing the due diligence that can guide the lenders in making their decisions. And those decisions will both be rooted in the values of our community and also, again, in the health of the organization and being able to repay the loan. But ultimately the decision makers on these loans are the lenders. The loans are unsecured, which is important to mention as well, which again, only makes it more so the case that the lenders want to assess risk. And then finally, if you haven't seen yet, you may see along the way that there is some guidance on what the covenant will look like, the expectations. I like to always remind people that even if you're newer to the business of loans and you've received grants from funders, when you receive a grant from a funder, you are essentially in a relationship with that funder, you are in a covenant with them, and you agree to certain terms. This is really no different. But in this case, of course, the terms, are such that you are required to follow certain rules in order to ensure that the funding is returned. And so the covenant really provides safeguards both for the borrower and the lender so that there's no surprises down the line. Excuse me. Sorry, I think I lost the slide here. While I get some water, may I invite one of my partners here from the OU to talk about the process, and I'll be back with some water.
Yeah, please go get some water.
Sorry.
I'm sure we have a lot of questions that we would like to pose to you, so it's important that we be able to continue the conversation. Anyone who would like to submit a question for Shira on her return, please use the Q&A feature that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. If you submit a question in the Q&A feature, I will moderate the question and submit it to Shira. In terms of the timeline for the OU, in terms of the timeline for our process, the application is now live on our website on ou.org/synagogue loan, SYNAGOGUE, loan, LOAN. That's where you could submit your application to, which will be transmitted to the JCRIF. If anyone has any questions regarding the application process, I'm happy to coordinate with you, to collaborate with you regarding to ensure that that application goes in smoothly. You can feel free to email me. I'll mention all of this information again before we conclude, but you can email me at my email address at Shaffer, Shaffery, SHAFFERY @ou.org. So Shira, a couple of questions are coming in while I kind of collate them.
And while you do that, first of all, my apologies. And also, I just to clarify, in addition to the step that you just heard about, the application process, which begins through the OU, it's a two-stage process. Once those applications are received and initially vetted by the lenders, applicants are then informed whether or not they'll be invited to submit their application through the Nonprofit Finance Funds portal. What we've tried to do is streamline the process as much as possible. So the questions that you'll see in the initial application process are about 90 to 95% verbatim, the same questions that NFF is requesting. So I say that so that I know we all save our documents really well, but to just provide guidance to say, it sounds cumbersome, but it's really intended not to be. And if you save that information, you should be it should be very easy to complete the second stage if you're invited to submit at that point.
Sure. So the number of questions are coming in. Again, thank you for that really comprehensive presentation. I want to start off with one, just a little bit of a broader question, just to initiate the conversation, and then we can dig a little bit into the weeds of some of these questions that have come in. Can you talk about, I'm going to ask the question, I guess, one of two ways. Can you talk about some lessons that you've learned already in this process exists in other denominations, is already underway with other groups? What I guess are the 2 or 3 biggest lessons learned? And another way to ask that question is, what should Shuls be thinking about concretely as they're filling in these applications?
That's a great question. So first I'll share that we're actually in the very early days of the process still. We've only begun reviewing the first round of applications. Don't worry, this is not the PPP loan process, so you're not behind the ball on anything. You're in a great part of the process, but my point is that we haven't gone through the entirety of it. That said, I would say that one of the things that has been one of the most interesting learnings, and in some ways the question already suggests that the person who's asking it is inclined to consider loans, is that we really are living through a unique moment, and I think that many organizations it's easier for them to understand how to use a grant. The possibility of using a loan is a newer endeavor. And so I would just say that this requires all sorts of responses in this moment. And for those of you who are a little bit more concerned or timid about taking on a loan, I encourage you to really consider it as part of your financial toolbox in the moment, to help you through this.
So I know that there are, yes, sorry, go on, Shira.
Oh, no, I was going to say one other thing, which is, the more that in the application process, the questions are pretty straightforward. The more that you can give the lenders a real sense of who you are as a congregation, the kinds of services that you provide, disruptions to those services and ways that you've pivoted. I think the more, I'm not suggesting that you have to write pages upon pages, but certainly more than 2 sentences. I would provide a few paragraphs of information to really help the lenders understand who you are and what you're trying to work through at the moment.
My impression also was the sense of responsibility within the institution, communicating a concrete plan or a projection of how to repay whatever loan is.
Yes, absolutely. That is definitely something that will be looked at, and that's in the questions. My point is just when you're both answering that question as well as other questions about your services and your pivots, the more information, the better, because the lenders are getting to know your organization, the way you're leading it, and so the more the better.
One question just to differentiate between the different efforts that this group in general is making. Someone does want to know, is the loan limited to Shuls, also applies to schools? I understand there are multiple efforts taking place, and I think it's probably important to share just a little bit what the multiple efforts are.
You mean what other parts of the Jewish ecosystem are accessing loans? Is that the question?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so just as we're having this partnership discussion with the OU, we have been working with the other major movements and actually having similar conversations with their congregations, the Reform movement, Conservative movement, Reconstructionist movement. We also were working with Chabad. We are working with Prisma on behalf of the day school world. We're working with the Foundation for Jewish Camps on the camping world, JCCA, Hillel International. One of the both overwhelming, both for good and for bad in this moment, actually, just because it really highlights how much need there is out there. it's also an incredible reminder how dynamic, how rich our Jewish organizational ecosystem is. We are trying, again, there are parts of our community that are not eligible, particularly the human and social service sectors are actually not eligible for this particular initiative, but even within education, engagement, and leadership, there's many, sectors of our community that are eligible.
Thank you. A couple of people have asked if you could speak about how the loan funds can be used inside a synagogue. Is there limitations on what it can be used for, or is it more flexible?
Yeah, I mean, it really is intended, it's really, the focus here is really about, we use the language of breathing room, bridge funding, but it really is about emergency funding in many ways, right? So it can be used for operations, it can be used for payroll, it can be used, similar to the way that, the PPP loan was used. I will say that at the same time, and this came up in the prior question, the lenders will ask, whether you have made decisions to really focus on what your services are, to pivot. If you have had to, for example, make decisions about summer programming, the expectation is that you're not now, employing counselors who aren't actually doing their job, right? But if it's services that are continuing through this period, you can use the funds to help you get, again, from point A to point B.
Thank you. A couple more questions came in. Could you describe what has been designed of the process once an application has been communicated to the JCRIF?
Yeah, so again, the applications will be sent through the OU, and then the OU will bring forward the slate of applications to JCRIF. There is then a process by which JFNA works to initially review the applications and bring them forward. We have a review committee that brings them forward to the lenders. At that point, the lenders initially review the applications to determine which of the applications will essentially be invited to complete the NFF application through their portal. And that piece, that part of the vetting process, both is intended to be mindful of both the financial and time investment that it'll take for NFF to do its due diligence. Once NFF completes its due diligence, those recommendations will go back to the lenders for final decisions. So we expect once JFNA has the applications in hand, we expect for about a 2.5 to 3 week turnaround.
I just want to remind people, if you have any more questions, to use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. Obviously, there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of enthusiasm for the effort. I'm not going to get into the details of the application itself. Any questions anyone has on the nature of the application and which kind of documentation to submit, one should reach out to me afterwards, and I'm happy to discuss them with you. And if there's something I don't know, I will find out the answer very quickly. Two questions, one a little bit more simpler and one a little bit more complex. Can we make available your slides afterwards?
That's the hard one, right? That's the hard question. Of course you can. Of course you can. No problem. Happy to share it.
Okay, good. Excellent. And if shuls and synagogues are looking to think a little bit more creatively about partnering with other institutions, let's say there's a Hebrew school and a shul that are thinking about working together to address some of their financial issues or financial challenges, or alternatively, there's another kind of organization that's looking to partner with a shul. Is this the address for them to talk about that kind of bridge funding, or is there another address, or does this not fall within the?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think that the lenders are open to to innovation in so much as, it, is sort of part of this pivot around services, in that it's sort of what the organization is doing to sort of continue to meet the needs of their community. It's hard to answer in the theoretical, so my advice to you is to bring forward through the process that will be made available, I guess, at the end of this call or following the call, any specific questions, and then I'm happy to then work with the OU to review them more specifically in terms of exactly how you want to use the loan, and then give you, more specific guidance.
Okay, thank you. I do want to mention that we are recording the call and do intend to share it out in case anyone missed any questions, or in case anyone wants to review the information that was shared. And has been mentioned, we at the OU are available to answer any questions that you may have about the application process. One other question that I think is on people's minds, as many shuls don't yet know the status of their financial security. I know, for example, my shul membership begins July 1. So we actually don't know how many people are going to be re-upping their membership or be able to pay their membership. How would you suggest shuls think about applying for this kind of loan if there's just uncertainty around their financial security, including whether they'll have annual events and high holiday revenue? Is unclear at this point.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, first of all, this is a learning experience across the board, certainly for me and for the lenders. And I think we say on a daily basis that we're flying the plane as we're building it, which is both terrifying and exhilarating. And what I'll say and I say it in connection to your question, because frankly, the funders started putting together this pot of money really 2 months ago. I don't think they had any sense where we'd be today, yet alone the fact that the future is still uncertain. So my guidance on this is to have a conversation with the OU to indicate that you might be interested in a loan, but not at the moment. Certainly our intention is for this partnership with the OU to go beyond this submission of applications. The lenders are both, first of all, we don't know how long the existing pot of money will be available. It depends on how quickly loans are given out. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a hope that additional funds will be made available by other funders who will join. So having a sense of what those needs are as they emerge will be very helpful. And we'll certainly continue to communicate with the OU if and when there's an opportunity to bring additional applications forward.
Okay, so the questions have slowed down a little bit, which is great. It means we answered everyone's questions. I do want to get a sense.
Yes, I do see a question that I'm happy to answer. It's a little bit more technical, but sure. I'm gonna translate it a little differently than I see it. I've been asked at various points if the loan can be used to refinance an existing debt, and the answer is that it's not out of the question. In other words, the lenders aren't necessarily inclined to just give a loan for the purpose of refinance, getting better terms. But if an applicant can, in their application, show that actually as you're thinking about how to navigate through this moment, that that you're able to apply the loan in such a way that allows you to continue to do your work, then and so it meets a need. I think that the lenders are open to that. And that, again, this is a place for innovation in thinking about how you work through where you are and what these resources are that you might be able to bring together.
Sure. A couple more questions came in if we just have a few more minutes. One specifically relates to building repairs and physical repairs of a plant. Does this fall within the vision of this kind of grant or not?
I would say that it does not so much fall within the vision. That being said, if there's a particular issue or there's a particular disruption, I'm sort of, I try not to say no without knowing all the details. It really, but so far that has not been the direction of it, but we know every situation is unique. And so, if you can bring forward some additional information, I'd be happy to discuss it and see if it makes sense.
It seems one of the main takeaways, at least I'm hearing, is this is the initiation of a conversation through you or through JRIC to talk about what the nature of this kind of interest-free loan would look like and how exactly it would help. Could you speak about briefly, just for a second, about Shuls that received PPP funding? Does that exempt them from this?
Not at all, not at all. So I would say that this is another piece of the evolution and the learning. In the early days when this fund was being put together, it was before the SBA loan process rolled out. So the funders didn't know exactly no one knew what the timeline would be for both the process itself or receiving money. We now know, of course, that the intended use of the PPP loans is through June 30th. And so everyone is very comfortable with the JCRIF loans as being another complement, right? There's the funders, by the way, have complete recognition that the JCRIF effort is not the answer to everything we're going through right now as a community. We hope that it's one of the opportunities to meet community needs. And so it can certainly be a complement to the PPP loan. And again, as you're thinking about the timeline, as you heard, the OU will be accepting applications for this through, I believe you said the 10th, right?
10th of June, yeah. The
10th of June. And so again, given that, I spoke about a 2.5 to 3 week turnaround, you're really not talking about, receiving loans as a result of this process until at the earliest, July 1. So even more so, it can be a complement to the PPP loans.
Okay, beautiful. Before we close, I just wanted to give you the opportunity. We all wear a lot of different hats, right? I'm here as an employee of the OU, but I'm also a shul rabbi, and I know a number of participants are wearing a number of different hats. Not to ask you to make a full presentation on the other opportunities that exist, but I think it's important that we just kind of describe the nature of the opportunities, so that if someone is also involved, perhaps may be able to pursue a grant as opposed to a loan in the other effort that the JCRIF is making.
Sure. I'm happy to speak briefly about the Aligned Grant Program. I'll say that, Felicia Herman, who runs the program, and I work very, very closely. The loan and grants are a complement to one another, and they're part of the same fund. And there are also some major differences in the way that they are operated. The loan program is really a consortium of seven of the 8 funders who have pooled their money together and are making collective decisions about how to deploy those loan dollars. The Aligned Grant Program is a process by which applications are being brought forward in a streamlined way, but the funders that are sitting around that table are making independent decisions about which of the programs they will fund. The Aligned Grant Pool they're also hoping to bring more funders in. It's smaller in nature, and it's really focused. There is a portion of it that will be used for emergency response, I think primarily on the national level. And they're also talking to national organizations, including the umbrellas, similar to the loan program, that are really focused on strategic shifts in their programs, in their operations, different ways to collaborate. So it's they're not inviting individual local applications for that. The best way to find out about whether there's an opportunity to engage in that is really through the OU, and the OU can have that conversation with Felicia directly.
Okay, thank you so much, Shira. Alan, I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
But to read again, and Shira, to you and to your team for taking the time with us and for all of the incredible efforts that have proceeded and will follow. So thank you.
Thank you, and really, you know, I think it was well said that this is really intended to be the beginning of a conversation. We certainly hope that the JCRIF loan funds are able to meet the needs of your communities and congregations. So I look forward to hearing from my partners at the OU with any questions that you may, you know, that may flow through them to me at any time.
Thank you so much, Shira. Thank you, Alan, as well. Thank you to the OU and the JFNA and the JCRIF and its funders. There's a lot of people to thank, and for everyone participating in the webinar. It's really it's heartwarming and reassuring to see the amount of people who are putting their creativity and their resources back into the Jewish community to help stabilize us during these rocky times. To fill out a loan application or to see really what the loan application entails, please visit our website, ou.org/synagogue loan. And the application process, as we mentioned, will be open through June 10th. And following that, JCRIF will be in touch once a loan is submitted. It's also important that you know the applications are being evaluated on a rolling basis. So there is a certain amount of urgency to be able to submit these applications. We at the OU are here to help you fill out the information in any way that you may need. If you need to discuss it, please be in touch with me, Yechiel Shaffer. My email address is Shaffer, SHAFFERY @ou.org. SHAFFERY@ou.org. It was also contained in the email invitation that was sent out via email that you used to reserve for this webinar. Session has been recorded and will be available to be viewed shortly via our website. And the OU would like to thank everyone again for participating. Wish you continued success in ensuring the financial security of your communities. Thank you for partnering with us at the Orthodox Union. And we'd like to take the opportunity to wish you all a Chag Sameach in advance of the very special holiday of Shavuot. Thank you so much again to everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.